joining with us today for the unveiling of GLI's 2021 state legislative agenda and a conversation with Kentucky Speaker of the House, David Osborne. This event is the fourth and final installation of our 2020 Capital Connection series presented by Norton Healthcare, and I can't think of a better way to close out this series for the year. I want to extend GLI's appreciation to our sponsors who made today's event possible. Our Capital Connections series presenting sponsor is Norton Healthcare. Our event sponsor is Ford Motor Company. And our supporting sponsors are Babbage co-founder and Crown Castle. Thank you all for your support of GLI and for being such active members of our regional business community. I'm excited to kick things off this afternoon with the formal unveiling of GLI's state legislative agenda. And after that, we'll hear from our sponsors, and then we'll jump into an exciting conversation between Speaker Osborne and Iris Wilbur-Glick, our VP of Public Policy and External Affairs. GLI releases our state legislative agenda every December, which outlines the business community's top legislative priorities for the upcoming sessions in Frankfort and Indianapolis. The agenda was the result of a months-long process that involved research, input from community stakeholders, discussions with policymakers, and most critically, engagement with hundreds of GLI members who graciously volunteer their time and expertise. While each year we're faced with new issues, the 2021 agenda presented a truly unique set of challenges. COVID-19 rages on, threatening the fabric of our economy and presenting challenges to businesses that we must address in our policymaking. In addition, calls for racial equity and justice have helped us become aware of policy changes that are needed to be made in order to make our laws more equitable. Building consensus among our 1,800 members and identifying the specific policy priorities that will move our region forward to address the challenges I just described is quite an endeavor. But we've got a proven track record, and it's my privilege to share some of these priorities with you all today. Beginning with our region's economic recovery, we continue to advocate aggressively for a fourth federal COVID-19 relief package. But there is much the General Assembly can do to drive our recovery and allow our region to rebuild better than ever. This includes establishing legal liability protections for employers from COVID-related lawsuits. This is not just a federal issue. The state must also take measures to support businesses. Protecting businesses from unemployment insurance tax increases. Even with the committed state investment to the UI Trust Fund, employers are facing a massive tax hike that will hurt businesses trying to recover. We have heard estimates that without more action, businesses could be facing increases of up to $100 per employee. Stabilizing our child care sector through increased investment. The pandemic has created a critical child care situation when it comes to workforce participation, particularly for working women. The General Assembly must prioritize investment in this sector to stabilize it and build a support model for the future. And maintaining regulatory flexibility for businesses such as bars and restaurants, which we want to continue to support by allowing measures like cocktails to go. Our restaurants are one of the industries most impacted by this pandemic, and we must do what we can to support them. In addition, we must continue pressing for longtime GLI priorities, such as authorizing sports wagering to bring in more revenue, increasing state investment in infrastructure, and allowing for local government tax reform. Our message to lawmakers is a simple one. Be bold. The private sector is doing everything it can to drive recovery. We need the General Assembly to match these efforts with smart and aggressive pro-growth public policies like the ones that I've mentioned. We also need the continued support of the General Assembly to advance racial equity in Greater Louisville and to ensure opportunities for success are truly open to all members of our community. The conversation should begin with the acknowledgement that access to opportunities for success, such as quality education, transportation, child care, and housing, has historically not been equitable across our community. The causes of these inequities are numerous, but systemic racism is certainly one of them. We have to invest in all levels of education, fund public transportation, provide access to childcare and affordable housing throughout the community. We must continue working to ensure that we make things better. In 2021, GLI will be calling for several additional changes to criminal justice reform. But I first want to thank the Kentucky General Assembly for being our partners throughout this process. We have been advocating for criminal justice reform for a number of years, and the support from the General Assembly first began with the felony expungement in 2015 and was later expanded in 2019 and 2020. So in 2021, again, back to making things better continually, we will be calling for the continual expansion of our expungement laws by reducing wait periods and lowering costs, removing barriers to education for formerly incarcerated Kentuckians by eliminating the statutory prohibition on ex-felons receiving Keys scholarships. Reforms to our bail system to enable individuals incarcerated for certain crimes to get back into the workforce while they await a hearing. Raising the felony theft threshold to help reduce incarceration rates. And we will encourage lawmakers to continue exploring legislative solutions to allow individuals with felonies to regain the right to vote. Finally, GLI is strongly supportive of ongoing conversations in Louisville and elsewhere on steps we can take to rebuild and sustain trust between law enforcement agencies and the communities they serve. We applaud the Louisville Metro Council for already making progress by establishing a new civilian review board and Office of Inspector General. We urge lawmakers in Frankfort to partner with our local elected officials here in Louisville and LMPD to support these efforts. It's vital that we keep these conversations moving. We will continue to discuss meaningful policy proposals with our Business Council to End Racism and other key community stakeholders, because we realize the status quo cannot continue. We need change and we need healing. You can read GLI's full 2021 legislative agenda on greaterlouisville.com. I also encourage you to follow us on Twitter at GLI Advocacy, and please subscribe to our Policy Distilled newsletter. GLI is the voice of the Greater Louisville business community in the halls of Frankfort and Indianapolis. Our government affairs staff is committed to working tirelessly to advocate for our region, but we cannot do this alone. As Speaker Osborne can attest to, lawmakers need to hear directly from their constituents, especially businesses and community leaders. They need to hear from you. I want to leave you today with a challenge. Everyone on this call has a state representative and a state senator either in Frankfort or Indianapolis with an email address, a phone number, and a mailing address. I challenge you to commit to contacting your representative and your senator at least once between now and the start of the legislative session in January. Introduce yourself, tell them you appreciate their service, and urge them to support your regional business community's legislative priorities in 2021. Civic engagement is critical not only to a healthy democracy, but to a healthy economy as well. With that, I would like to now hand this over to Riggs Lewis with Norton Healthcare, our presenting sponsor. Over to you, Riggs.
Thank you, Sarah. I hope you can hear me. I'll take that as a yes. Good. Well, Sarah, we look forward to a time soon when we can meet again in person for these events. That time is soon. It's been 9 months since COVID-19 hit Kentucky. Those early days, we had more questions than answers, and our leaders then, like today, faced tough decisions. One of those early decisions was how state government would communicate with the citizens in 120 counties during this pandemic. Norton Healthcare was hired by the state to run the COVID-19 hotline, but no funding existed. I remember the emergency meeting in March with Speaker Osborne as we presented the business plan to run the hotline. And it was his leadership that funded this program for a year. And as of today, we have answered 300,000 calls in 120 counties on issues from symptoms to testing sites to evictions, unemployment insurance, and now the vaccine rollout. Speaker Osborne has been leading on COVID-19 since the beginning, and Kentucky and the business community will need him as we face the challenges of rebuilding our state after we defeat this disease. So it's my pleasure to introduce Iris Wilbur Glick, Vice President of Public Policy and External Affairs at GLI, and our distinguished guest, Kentucky Speaker of the House, David Osborne. As many of you know, Speaker Osborne represents portions of Oldham County in the House of Representatives and was designated by GLI as one of our most valuable policymakers in both 2019 and 2020 legislative sessions. Speaker Osborne, on behalf of GLI, thank you for what you do to support the region's business community, and thank you for being here with us today. Iris, I'll turn it over to you to start the discussion.
Thank you, Riggs, and Speaker Osborne. It is always great to get an opportunity to talk with you. We encouraged our membership to submit questions, and as you can imagine, we received quite a few on topics such as the pandemic, the economy, racial equity, just to name a few, as well as inviting your thoughts and philosophy on leadership as the leader of the Kentucky House of Representatives. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. I would like to start very broad. Can you outline for our members what you view as some of the House's top legislative priorities heading into 2021?
Well, first of all, Iris, thanks for the opportunity to be with you. I hate that we're continuing to have to do things virtually, but I do appreciate the fact that we've kind of adopted more of a Q&A type of venue here, because I think that as cumbersome as virtual meetings are, but as necessary as they are anymore, they're also painful when it comes to prepared remarks, both for those of us that have to make them and for those of us that have to listen, or those that have to listen. It's just very difficult and challenging. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here and look forward to being back live and in person sometime soon. Sooner than later, hopefully. Obviously, the session starts and stops with the budget. It's the one thing that we are constitutionally required to do. The Constitution mandates that we do it, and we will do it, and we will do it under difficult circumstances this year. The fact that we are, well, to back up just a second, as many of you know, most of you probably know, we passed a one-year budget this past year. That was our normal budget session in 2020. Typically, we pass a two-year budget. With the incredible amount of uncertainty, the lack of reliable numbers that we had, we felt like the only thing that we could do is take the most pessimistic numbers that we could and pass as limited a budget as we possibly could. And that's what we did, knowing that we would be in a difficult position, but hopefully with a little more clarity coming into 2021. And I think we do have a little more clarity, though no less certainty. Consensus Forecasting Group met Friday, gave us some revised numbers, somewhat more optimistic than I think many of us expected, and certainly that is it's encouraging, but it's also a bit disconcerting, because I don't think any of us want to be overly optimistic with our financial projections as we go forward into this budget. And I think that you will see that reflected in the kind of budget that we ultimately pass when we do roll something out this year. Look forward to the governor's version of the budget that will come the first week of session, which will be, I think he's scheduled to present that to us on January the 8th. The last budget, as difficult as it was a really good experience. Though difficult, it was one that was bipartisan. It was bicameral. It was one where we had developed a very, very good relationship, working relationship with the governor's budget director, John Hicks, who's a really, really intelligent man that understands the budget probably as well as anybody in Frankfort. So look forward to beginning that process again and understanding how difficult it will be, both from a financial standpoint and from a time standpoint. Certainly beyond that, getting Kentucky back to work, getting our economy moving again will be our focus. It's probably not surprising to you to know that as I looked at your legislative agenda and your legislative priorities, that they mirror many of ours. So that's not uncommon, but always good to see.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as we're reporting out, I know we're getting some incoming messages, and all of our speakers will do our best to increase our sound and the voice volume here. So we appreciate everyone's patience as we are continuing to refine this virtual experience. I want to shift gears a bit, Mr. Speaker, and really hone in on the pandemic and our economic recovery. Looking specifically at the public health side of the pandemic, what do you view as the role of the General Assembly in continuing to protect the health of Kentuckians and also support the deployment of a vaccine in Kentucky?
Well, obviously, public health is paramount to all of us. Just because we may disagree a little bit from time to time on what those policies should look like does not mean that we believe it's any less important. I think that clearly the deployment of the vaccine is going to be crucial, not only to getting our economy back open, but also to take the opportunity to educate our constituents, to lead by example, to encourage good practices, safe practices, healthy practices. I think that so many of the mandates that have been handed down rely on the people of Kentucky to accept them. They rely on voluntary compliance, essentially. Certainly, there are some extraordinary measures that can be used to force compliance, but at the end of the day, it's about buy-in. It's about people understanding, and I think that we as leaders in Kentucky have to take that as an opportunity to explain the importance of it, as opposed to managing by edict. I think that we manage by example and encourage compliance with healthy practices.
In terms of getting our economy back on track, GLI's 2021 agenda, outlines the business community's vision for a robust recovery. And I would like to get your take on some of our priorities in particular. Let's start with liability protections for business from COVID lawsuits. How does the House currently view that issue?
Extremely important. And it's actually a kind of a bifurcated way of looking at things. I think that there are both perceived liability issues and there are real liability issues. And I think that for the purpose of getting Kentucky's economy working again, we don't need to really differentiate between the two, because in order for businesses to reopen, in order for businesses to start investing again, they have to be comfortable that there's some protections there, regardless of whether those liability problems are real or perceived. I think many of the liability problems that we see are again perceived. I think that there are some unfounded fears in many of these cases, but again, that doesn't matter. There are some very real liability issues that we need to address, but the main thing that we need to address with liability is easing people's fears, because that's what will dictate behavior, and so we will protect. That will be one of our priority issues, probably the first week of session, that we will do. Our Majority Whip Chad McCoy, as well as Banking and Insurance Chairman Bart Rowland, are working on liability reform issues. At the end of session, we passed some provisions in Senate Bill 150 that would provide overall liability protections for existing businesses that were shifting their models to make hand sanitizer, mask, PPE of other sorts, to make sure that they had protections to go ahead and gear up into those production areas. It will expand on that, making sure that we expand that to all businesses that are operating responsibly. We want to make sure that the people that are complying with recommendations, complying with safe practices, are not targeted. And we hope and expect to give them that assurance. The recommendations that we see are so constantly changing that it's very difficult to have comfort that you're following exactly what is put forth at all times. I think that if you go back to the beginning, we could have a person could have probably followed every single CDC recommendation that was put forth, and at the same time, at some point in this past 8 months, could have been in violation of those very same policies. So I think that there is justifiable and understandable fear and concern for liability, and that will be one of our foremost issues to tackle early on.
So great to hear that, Mr. Speaker. As you can imagine, we're hearing from all types of companies on this issue. The last thing any of us want is this chilling impact to us being able to reopen business and really get back on the right track for economic recovery. And so we look forward to working with you, the rest of House leadership and the General Assembly to figure out how we can protect businesses from predatory litigation. So thank you for that response.
Absolutely.
Moving to an equally as challenging of an issue, let's talk about unemployment insurance. GLI has been a long time supporter of comprehensive reforms to Kentucky's UI system. And, this year in particular, we're concerned about unemployment insurance tax increases to employers, to businesses. So how is the House thinking about these challenges and kind of your all's approach to overcoming these come next year?
It is potentially catastrophic. As everybody is painfully aware, and every employer is unbelievably cognizant of the potential increase in UI taxes. That is something that we are committed to mitigating. It is, and it is the long-term effect. And I don't want to in any way, shape, or form suggests that the allocation of UI benefits has been unnecessary, unneeded, or unwarranted. It certainly has been. It's been a lifeline for many, many people. But the fact of the matter is, many non-traditional recipients of UI insurance have been drawing unemployment during these times. Again, I think certainly needed, necessary, and important to the lives and well-being of many, many Kentuckians. But the fact of the matter is, those are people that have not traditionally paid into unemployment insurance. We've got to figure out a way to pay that back without forcing that on traditional employers. Again, the traditional employers have paid their fair share all along, and because of government action, they are paying way more than their share. And so we've got to figure out a way to mitigate that. Chairman Weber of Economic Development and Workforce Investment has been working on some legislation along with Robbie Mills over in the Senate that would help to mitigate those tax increases, as well as begin the process of unemployment insurance reform. That's been, as you mentioned, it's been a priority of ours for some time. Very difficult to find that balance, especially when the system is under the stress that it is. It makes it very difficult to reform. But at the same time, I think there's probably no better time to begin those reforms than right now, because many of the things that we would take as temporary mitigating measures would be long-term actions that will help stabilize the UI fund for years to come.
Let's talk about childcare. The pandemic has exposed just how critical this sector is to Kentucky's workforce and the impacts to Kentucky working families. What can the General Assembly do to help stabilize childcare businesses throughout the Commonwealth?
Yeah, it's a difficult issue. It is, like so many things in this this pandemic has exacerbated so many problems that we've known were out there before, but the availability and affordability of good childcare has long been an issue, not only a societal issue, but a workforce issue. And the profit margins of these childcare centers has been very, very slim from the beginning, and the restrictions that have been put on them, the number of kids they can have in their childcare facilities, the PPE requirements has only continued to make that business model very, very difficult. It's one that's difficult for us to try to figure out how to solve, quite frankly. We will continue to try to ease some licensing fees, um, some regulatory restrictions that may help streamline. But it's a difficult model for us to try to fix at this point. It is, when you look at workforce sectors that have been disproportionately affected by this pandemic, and certainly we all know that the restaurant industry, many service industries have been disproportionately affected, but childcare is one of them. And I think if there's an opportunity for us to look at um, some CARES Act funding, second round CARES Act funding that would help to stabilize those businesses, we will certainly consider those options.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Mr. Speaker, because one final question I have related to the pandemic and the economy relates to something that GLI has been working on for months now, which is aggressively advocating for another relief package from Congress. The pandemic. So what are your views on the need for another COVID relief package? And to what extent is the General Assembly planning for the presence or absence of another COVID relief bill?
It's tempting to be hopeful. It's tempting to really advocate for, but understanding, of course, that these are still taxpayer dollars, and we need to be conscious of the fact that just because they are federal dollars doesn't mean that they're not an additional burden on the taxpayers of the country. I would hope that if there is another one, and I think there will be, that it be maybe more strategic in nature than in the past. I mean, and we've got to put some more. I think we've got to do a better job of evaluating how that money is being spent. Just here in Kentucky, just to name a few things, we've spent over $100 million in contact tracing. Excuse me, and we have no data to show for it. We spent $16 million bringing a third-party entity in to mitigate unemployment insurance problems, and we still have 80,000 people, some since March, that haven't been processed. So I do think that it will certainly help if we have an additional stimulus package. I think that we have to plan as if we won't have one. I have had conversations with many in our federal delegation. I know that Leader McConnell is working diligently on it now. One of the areas that I think that it is completely appropriate for the federal government to get involved is in the area of unemployment insurance. Again, because of the actions of the government, many people have been put in the place of having to draw unemployment, and that has overwhelmed our employers that are traditionally paying into that system. And I think that is one area that I think could be very targeted to help stabilize those unemployment insurance funds around the country, and be very beneficial to helping both states and employers as well as employees.
Thank you. I'm going to switch gears again and talk about some issues around racial equity. As Sarah mentioned, this is a deeply important issue to GLI members, and we are encouraging the General Assembly to pursue legislation that advances racial equity throughout Kentucky. I have several questions, but first, I would like for you to speak broadly to how members of the House are thinking and talking about this issue.
It is an active conversation. We just came out of our retreat, such that it was a one-day retreat in Frankfurt, and it was a very significant portion of discussion, or topic of discussion during that retreat. People understand that it is a societal issue as well as a workforce issue. It's very broadly. We know that there are opportunities for police reforms. Both President Stivers and Representative Attica Scott are working on no-knock legislation. that has considerable support. We've been working closely with O.J. Alika and the group that he has put together, Anti-Racism Kentucky, to address not only some societal issues, but economic issues, workforce issues, education issues. We continue to see incredible gaps in those areas, and they are equally important to the police reforms that get discussed probably more frequently, but I think no less important.
One concept that GLI is continuing to explore and would welcome your insights is the legislative proposals to pursue racial inequity. So would love to get your thoughts on, how the General Assembly may move forward with racial impact statements, such as similar to fiscal impact statements for legislation moving forward. Does your caucus think that type of concept would be effective? And if so, how could that be useful moving forward?
Actually, I think it's generally speaking, the body would be very receptive to it. There have been a couple of amendments over the past couple of years that have been filed that would create racial impact statements and in those. I'm sorry, my screen just went blank, Iris. I assume you're still with me. Okay, I can't see you, but hopefully you can see me. Anyway, I apologize. Those amendments have requested on pieces of legislation that we do have racial impact statements or racial impact studies, and in both of those instances, the amendments have actually been have been out of order on the bill, but that they're filed on. But in both cases, I asked both then Leader Atkins and Leader Jenkins to refile that as an independent bill, and we would absolutely make sure it got priority. And it hasn't happened yet, but I believe it will happen this year.
Very good. And switching gears slightly here, as you may know, and we mentioned at the top of the program, GLI has long supported reforms such as expungement, bail reform, removing bans on ex-felons receiving key scholarships. The list kind of goes on, but I'll just for brevity. So in 2021, we also want to work on initiatives to improve the relationship between law enforcement and communities. Can you talk about how the House is thinking through these issues, such as criminal justice reform and broadly law enforcement reform?
Criminal justice reform is something that I believe that just about everybody comes together and believes that we need. The problem with criminal justice reform, much like the problem with overall comprehensive tax reform has been over the years, is that it's such a broad topic that while everybody may agree that we need some type of criminal justice reform, it's been very, very difficult to come with consensus on exactly what that reform looks like. One of the things that Chairman Petrie, who was now our new Appropriations and Revenue Chair, but at the time Judiciary Chair, he realized this issue, and so he set out last year to break criminal justice reform down into multiple smaller areas and try to tackle them individually and find consensus on those things individually, and has spent the last year building a lot of consensus. I thought we were there last year on bail reform. At the last minute, the Commonwealth attorneys and some of the judges found some concerns, and they were justifiable concerns. It wasn't that they were against it. They found some concerns with how they were done. So I think we're back on track with that. I think we may have a solution on that. Jason Nemes has worked very hard on that through the interim, and I believe is continuing to bring some consensus on that issue. The felony ban on keys money, I believe, will be a top priority. Only makes sense. Again, that's not just a societal issue. That is absolutely a workforce issue, and will help with help ease recidivism rates. So I think that there will be a lot of support for that. The Again, I believe that there will be some, as far as police reforms, I believe there will be some consensus on no-knock warrants. Again, I know that President Stivers has been working on a bill. I know that Attica Scott has filed her bill, and it has a lot of support in the House. So I look forward to those conversations and finding consensus on that. I think there are other opportunities for police reforms that will bring together both uh, citizen members as well as members of the law enforcement community. I think the citizen review panel is a positive step. I think it's one that will have a lot of support, or has a lot of support at the state level. So I think that we will continue to try to give all the tools we can on that. A little bit of reluctance. I know that one of the things that they've asked for is subpoena power, and there's some reluctance in that to give non-elected entities subpoena power. That's not even something we give ourselves. We only have one committee in Frankfurt that actually has subpoena power. So I'm not saying it can't happen. I might be able to be persuaded, and I know that some of our members, especially our attorneys that are in the body, are trying to do a kind of an in-depth dive into that. And I'm not ready to commit to doing it, but I'm not not saying that it can't happen either.
Well, all of that right there, Mr. Speaker, is highly encouraging. GLI looks forward to working with you and the entire General Assembly on these solutions. Just like you outlined, not only are a lot of these legislative proposals about the root causes of barriers to work, but we are highly interested in how we can overcome disproportionate outcomes that impact our communities of color, our people of color. And on a similar note, we also recognize that education is also critical to advancing racial equity. So shifting gears again, would be interested to hear your thoughts and feedback on the types of education initiatives that the House might consider next year.
Well, you're exactly right. I think to look at this, you have to look at the entire issue holistically. We know that the education gaps, the economic gaps, are very real, and it's important to solve them from every angle. You can't just look at one particular issue on criminal justice reform without looking at educational opportunities, without looking at economic opportunities. Certainly, we will do everything we can to provide the additional tools that we can for virtual learning. But we've got to get kids back in school. I firmly believe, and many educators that I talk to every single day believe that not having kids in school is only continuing to broaden the education gap that is so prevalent. And I believe that the same as with them reopening the economy, we've got to be more strategic in how we handle these shutdowns. We've got to give schools the flexibility that they need to operate safely. There are a lot of schools that have made incredible investments, gone above and beyond in providing safe workplace environments, safe place for students, and I think it's imperative that we get kids back in the classroom as quickly as possible. I think that there's opportunities that we continue to explore along the economic divide as well, whether that be opportunity zones, whether that be earned income tax credits. They are difficult on a state level. Those are both federal programs that we've been researching very thoroughly during the interim to try to figure out how to expand opportunity zones on a state level with state tax incentives and also the earned income tax credit that would follow along, and that also fits kind of into our our public assistance reform bill that we've been working on, that David Mead and I've been working on the last 2 years, and that is to provide gap insurance for employees. We know that the number one reason that people that are interested in joining the workforce are hesitant to join the workforce is the fear of losing health care. We've got to make sure that that is not an excuse for people that want to re-enter the workforce. We should never have a situation, and I know it's a Pollyanna type of wish, but we should never be accepting of hearing someone say that they can't afford to take a job, and that is dooming people to being on public assistance as opposed to being able to lift themselves out of it. And I believe that we've gotten very, very close on the health insurance side of that equation, and I hope that we'll be able to pass something this year that will provide that gap insurance.
So all of that is very encouraging, Mr. Speaker. We've been privileged to connect directly with Speaker Pro Tem David Mead on a lot of those policy proposals that you just overviewed, and we're excited to have a seat at the table and contribute to those solution-based discussions. And so hopefully we'll have more to report back soon, but thank you for that opportunity. Shifting gears a bit again here, and we actually received quite a few questions about some sort of non-policy-ish questions about leadership and your style, your approach. And so, not to put you on the spot, but kind of want to kind of dig a bit deeper as to how our members can learn more about you, get to know you a bit more, and some of the interesting dynamics of how Frankfurt works. So, as the Speaker of the House, you are the leader of a 100-member body representing all different regions of the Commonwealth. Can you talk a little bit about some of the unique leadership challenges that come with your position and how you overcome them? And then also maybe describe just your overall management style. How do you make it work?
I'm not sure yet. I just continue to kind of paint by numbers at this point. It's been an interesting challenge. Obviously, it seems like that. We've yet to have that period of calm since I've been speaker. It started under unusual circumstances, and we've had to continue dealing with unusual circumstances for the last 4 years. So it's been a learning experience. It's been a lot of soul searching, self-evaluation, which is sometimes painful. But I think generally speaking, I'm a business person, and I try to run the house like I would want my business run, and that is to empower people to make decisions, to surround myself with the best people I possibly can, the smartest people, and listen to them. I am a firm believer that the more voices that you can have in a discussion, the better. I'm a firm believer that disagreement is not a bad thing. I think the best solutions in many cases come from disagreement. I don't take disagreements as attacks or challenges to me. I think that every time that I hear a disagreement that convinces me otherwise, I take that as a success because it wouldn't have been something that I would have normally considered. Again, the times that we've had over the past few years have made it difficult to be a long range planner, which is something that I don't like, because in business, that's the way I operate in my business, is to develop long-term plans, long-term goals, and set forth a path on how to get there. There's been a lot of boulders in our path over the last few years, and that's part of the challenge. That is, it's being flexible, it's being malleable, and being willing to adjust and to learn from those that are around us and listen to alternative opinions. So again, I'm not sure that I can exactly quantify what my leadership style is, but it's been one that has been forced to evolve a little bit over the last few years too.
Well, and then on that note, I'm sure the pandemic has tested all your limits. And so you and President Stivers, along with others in leadership, have a lot of influence and decision-making abilities within the Legislative Research Commission, which those that may not know, that is the entity that operates the legislature, if you will, and how you all conduct session.
Right, and it really does present a unique set of challenges.
Sorry, yeah, we're getting a little bit of a disconnect. So sorry, Mr. Speaker, I'll pick up where I left off.
Okay.
So, with the pandemic, the LRC, your decision-making role, can you kind of share with us how you all will be approaching the legislative session, how you'll be conducting business, essentially during an ongoing pandemic?
Well, let me first of all say that we will be there doing business. There was considerable discussion toward the end of last session that we just simply needed to go home, and I felt like that was inappropriate. Then we are constitutionally bound to do our jobs. I take that responsibility very seriously, and I hope that our members do. I think that there were some members that grumbled that we shouldn't be meeting last year, and for those people that don't feel like that they need to meet, I would encourage them to find other jobs. We will take every precaution we possibly can, following every guideline we possibly can. We have and we are continuing to follow CDC guidelines. We have consulted with public health officials about safe practices, understanding that having 100 people in a room is no longer possible. We've made significant technology upgrades in both our committee rooms in the annex as well as in the House chambers that will now allow people to vote remotely from their offices. They will still have to be in Frankfurt. They'll have to be at their desk with their desktop computer to access the House floor, but they will be able to vote in real time from their desk and from their private offices. Certainly, if people want to come to the floor, we will make provisions for them to do that. If they want to come to the floor to speak, if they want to come to the floor for debate, they were certainly. We're going to make every accommodation that we possibly can to keep them and our workers as safe as possible. There are over 300 people that work at LRC in the Capitol Annex, and we have to consider them in everything that we do, and will do that. President Stivers and I have both implemented mask policies throughout the interim, and for the most part, people are complying with it. Occasionally they don't, and they have to be reminded, but we will continue to do that. It also presents some unique caucus dynamics. The good news is we now have 75 members. The bad news is we now have 75 members with no place to meet. It's amazing to me, as large and expansive as the Capitol and the Capitol complex is, there's not a single place on Capitol grounds that will accommodate 75 people in one room with any pretense of social distancing. So that presents some interesting challenges. We are making a few structural changes within our caucus rooms to try to provide for more people to get in than currently can, but there's still no way we can get 75. We're looking at the possibility of, I know LRC is looking at the possibility of temporary structures on the annex grounds that will allow for larger committee meetings, for caucus meetings, for places to hold the public when they are coming in and out, testifying at committees. But it's going to be a challenge, and it will certainly limit the amount of things that we can tackle. We will have, with the budget being a limiting factor in and of itself, but also the difficulty in meeting. I think you will see a very, very limited, compact agenda that we will be tackling this year. We've got 22 incoming freshmen overall. We have 21, and it's on some level it's unfortunate for them because one of the most beneficial things that we can do with our new members is give them projects to work on, to give them bills to work on that kind of help them get their feet wet to get them used to the legislative process. There's just not going to be that opportunity this year. So we're going to try to do that more in groups where we may put 4 or 5 of them in a group to work on something. But even at that, the personal interaction, which is so vitally important to the legislative process, interacting with constituents, interacting with business organizations, like GLI. Those opportunities are going to be greatly reduced. So it presents challenges. But look, I'm an optimist. I get accused of being Pollyanna all the time. I think that it gives us tremendous opportunity.
Well, I know we're coming up on time, Mr. Speaker, and before we conclude, and I'm going to allow you to kind of have the final say, I want to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors who make Capital Connections and other GLI's events possible. And so thank you to our Capital Connections series sponsor, Norton Healthcare. Castle. And so bear with me, I know our connection is getting a little connected, but just want to thank our sponsors again for their ongoing support, especially through this year. So Speaker Osborn, thank you again for speaking with Mr. Speaker. Just want to thank you for connecting with GLI today and for your support of our regional business community. It means more than you'll ever know. But like I mentioned, I want to give you the opportunity to close us out. So any parting comments?
Well, Iris, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you for just a few minutes today. I appreciate everybody that's taken the time to tune in. Obviously, our opportunities, as I just said, our opportunities to have extensive dialogue and interaction are very limited, but they're no less important. Actually, probably the opportunities we have now, the few opportunities are more important than ever because they are so limited in number. Thanks for the work that you do, and thanks for the work that your organization does. And I want to encourage everybody that's on this call. As Sarah said to begin with, everybody has a state rep, everybody has a state senator. Reach out to us. The volume of communications is overwhelming right now. So it is very difficult to be as responsive as we would like to be all the time. It seems like every day I turn on my email and I've got 300 or 400 emails waiting for some type of response. It's impossible to respond to all those in a timely fashion. But everyone that I know reads them every single day, and everyone goes read. Everyone is taken seriously. So continue to have that type of dialogue, that interaction with your legislatures, and I look forward to continuing to work with GLI on your priorities and getting Kentucky back on its feet.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. With that, everyone, please enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And from GLI, we hope you have a safe and healthy holiday season. Take care.